Dude, so this snowstorm that hit here on the East Coast has not left us. Like, there's still mounds and mounds of snow ice that is on the, like, my Jeep is parked on the street right now, and it's at like a 45-degree angle because I drove. Like, one of the great things about driving an SUV and not a sedan is I can create parking spots. And it's allowed me to have a spot basically anywhere I want to go right at the front door, because they haven't shoveled anything right now on the sidewalks. They barely plowed properly, more than one lane in each direction on main streets. And so cars are just like boxed in.
Have you been following the parking spot wars where people shovel out their drive? They'll shovel out a parking spot, someone else parks there, and then they take revenge on them.
No, I know exactly what you're describing because my wife refuses to move her car.
Yeah.
She's on the street, and like, I shoveled it out, and she's like, I know that I can get in and out of it, and I'm not getting out of it until I absolutely have to. So I know exactly what you're describing, but I haven't been following the battle along with it. But I just watched one of my neighbors across the street who clearly has a connection to somebody that's got a backhoe, pulled up, backhoe digs out a spot. They move their car a few inches forward into this perfectly cleaned spot. But I didn't realize they're dumping the snow into the spot of their next door neighbor. And so next door neighbor's gone, like went to work or whatever they did. This person is dumping the snow into the spot that neighbor pulled out of. And so now that person comes home and has nowhere on the street because none of the other spaces are clean. And so if I'm them and I see that on my Ring camera, I am coming to ring your doorbell to tell you I saw that crap you just did.
I think we're getting some cabin fever. All right. On today's show, maybe a little big tech earnings. So an AI story I want to hit where zero revenue AI companies are getting valued at billions and billions of dollars. And
Is it called Oracle?
No, ones that don't have revenue.
Oh.
What did we say about saying nice things about Oracle? I thought we were going to...
Well, I happened to see on the news today that they have new spending plans and they're planning on taking on more debt and issuing more shares. And I just assumed that had to be the company you were talking about.
See, I'm trying to set up the show for the listener right now and tell them what topics to expect. And you're just throwing me curveballs. We're going to probably do a insurance discussion. And then we've got questions from you we're going to address at the end of the show. All right, let's get into it. We've had some big tech earnings roll in. And just before we get to the other stories, you always have something you want to get off your chest for the listeners who made it through the first part of the show. But any thoughts on the big tech earnings you want to get off your chest?
Yeah, I don't understand why Microsoft is down 12% since reporting their earnings. I imagined that when I saw the selling after hours after they announced earnings, by the time we got to the opening bell the next morning, it probably would have been bought back up and it would have been a non-conversation. But not only did it stay down in the negative 12% range the entire trading day, the day after, it's still there. And we're like 4 or 5 days now removed. So you've had more than enough opportunity to look under the hood, recognize that, yes, they decreased growth in cloud revenues by 1 percentage point from last month. And they did increase capital expenditures related to AI by a few $1 billion. But that was to be expected. That was foreshadowed. You were told that was coming. And by the way, the CFO, Amy Hood, came out with her comments and said, had we chosen to use all of our cloud capacity to suit our customers' needs, we definitely would have hit the 40% cloud revenue goal. However, we chose to use that specifically for growth in the cloud compute sector. So using that capacity to help build out the data center side of the business, which they believe is going to be additive and beneficial years down the road instead of just using it for today. So all that to say, it at least would have made sense to me that a lot of the people who sold shares initially the day of earnings would be buying back those shares the next morning when they finally had a chance to really read through and recognize that this is a non-event. But that didn't happen, and I don't understand why.
I have two theories. One is I think investors, traders are starting to punish Microsoft for its relationship with OpenAI. And then the second is, we talked about this on our economic narrative show, which I said one of the biggest economic narratives of 2026 is that investors are going to want to start seeing a payoff from artificial intelligence investments. And it seems like they really didn't like that Microsoft was saying we're going to accelerate the build out.
Well, I don't disagree with any of that, except to say we knew the relationship with OpenAI was what it is a year ago. So there's nothing new in there that should give you enough of a worry that now is the time it makes sense to sell Microsoft. That said, one of the things that I personally, as a shareholder, to me, Microsoft is one of the anchor investments in my portfolio, meaning it's one that I anticipate holding for a decade or more, that something would have to go meaningfully wrong or change meaningfully at the company for me to consider selling it. So like, new CEO would have to come in the door, not named Satya Nadella, and it'd have to be somebody that's remarkably different and maybe is not even an insider. It'd have to be like the CEO of PayPal is now the CEO of Microsoft. And like, I'm going to sell and see what happens. Good luck to the guy. So short of that, this is a stock I intend to own for the long term. So it bothered me as I'm looking at the earnings and I'm listening to the earnings call, and we're getting excited initially that their remaining performance obligations, their accounts receivable, went up by $250 billion or something in this one quarter. Okay, great. More money to be made. However, it turns out the majority, if not all of that contract, that commitment comes from OpenAI. And so immediately my brain says, well, we can just assume that's not going to come in the door. Like it could. Part of it could, all of it could, but I'm just going to assume it's not going to come in the door. Do I still want to own this company? And the answer is yes. So I just don't understand the violent sell-off in this company that followed their earnings.
I think it's because we exist in a violent market, and that has been true. That's become increasingly more true. And to be clear, I was giving, I think, the context of the sell-off, not necessarily whether or not I believe it. I have a position in Microsoft. I have no intention of selling it like you. The other story that I wanted to, this was what I need to talk about with someone, which is this resist and unsubscribe movement that is being touted by Scott Galloway. It's in response to what's going on with ICE. And I want to talk about the market fundamentals of it, because this is interesting to me, where Scott Galloway has this idea that President Trump doesn't respond to anything really, but moves in the market. And that's been the basis of the taco trade. He announces these big tariffs on everybody on Liberation Day. The market goes down, and then he eventually chickens out and says, oh, we're going to make deals and that sort of thing. And the idea is we are so Galloway is fed up with what ICE is doing, as are many Americans, and therefore the way that you can ultimately resist is by unsubscribing from technology services, which include your Facebook, but not Instagram, because that's how they're getting the message out. Your ChatGPT subscription, Paramount Plus, Netflix, Amazon Prime. And in doing so, enough people will cancel. That will create a tremor in those securities that catches the attention of Donald Trump, which will encourage him to be less aggressive with ICE. And it's definitely being promoted right now within his circle.
I understand the argument. I understand the premise. I think one thing that really gets government's attention is commerce, right? If you think about the Montgomery bus boycott during the civil rights movement and its ability to actually stop desegregation and also force businesses all throughout the South to allow Black people to sit at lunch counters and eat a sandwich, or whatever, go to hotels and actually be able to stay there and all those kinds of things. However, those movements take a very long time. They take a lot of dedication. They take a very long time, and they take people who are willing to actually suffer legitimate pain and discomfort to get their point across and have their voice be heard. So one, I'm not convinced that Americans are actually willing to be uncomfortable long enough to see something like this through. Two, Donald Trump is a 0-day options kind of guy. And what I mean by that is if it's not a thing that's happening right now in the moment today or will happen within the next 24 hours, I'm not sure it gets his attention. Like, it will take several quarters of these companies putting out earnings reports where there's a steady decline in revenue that's tangibly shown, over the months of X, Y, and Z, we had this many unsubscribes from paying Prime members and everything else. Like, it'll take several quarters for that to work its way through. There's a boycott right now against Target that took several years before it actually materialized in a way that Target share price has now been like cut in half or something. And I wish the new CEO luck. But all that to say, I'm not sure that this is going to have the effect that Scott hopes and thinks and wants it to. But I do understand the premise, and I won't talk it down if people do want to participate. I just don't have the same faith in my fellow Americans' willingness to not spend as he does.
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes America great is that you have the ability to protest and do whatever you want with your money. I found myself in a logical circle on this one, which is if the market believes that the slowdown in spending is temporary, then that will be treated like a large scale weather event, which means, Home Depot says we couldn't open our shops in Texas or whatever because there was flooding and we expect it to open back up. So by telling the market that this is a temporary phenomenon, I think the market would immediately look past it, right? Because the thing that really affected, I think, the liberation days, there was a moment where the market believed that this is a permanent and fundamental change to the way America operates. But if there's a minor sales decline, the CEOs can say there was a temporary protest and we expect things to get back to normal in Q3. So that's where I find myself in that logical loop. If it is a permanent unsubscribe, let's say it actually works enough, people cancel their subscriptions and this is believed to be a permanent trend, I don't think it would create the temporary price dip that it is intended to create. It could create, but trying to play macro games, you could possibly create longer term declines than you intend to. And I think there's a lot of moving parts with this one.
Well, I think the goal is to create a long-term decline, right?
I think my belief is that it is and I could be wrong. Scott, you can come on the show whenever you want, but it's my belief that this is a short-term decline that gets Trump's attention, that then we'll resubscribe and things can potentially move back to normal.
See, I get the impression from listening to him talk about this. This is if you are pissed off at Tim Cook for going to the Melania premiere because it goes against everything you believe in as a card-carrying iPhone holder and an iPhone holder and a card-carrying American, that you will unsubscribe from any and everything Apple has to offer, meaning you're going to get a Samsung Galaxy tomorrow morning and you're never coming back because Apple can't do anything to earn back my business. That's the way it sounds to me, not necessarily like I'm just not going to pay for my Apple TV subscription for the next couple of months and that'll show them.
So I think the answer is that it's both. And I think there is a messiness to this, which is for Apple, you're supposed to unsubscribe from Apple Music, Apple News, Apple TV, Apple One, avoid purchasing Apple hardware products. So there's there are different moving parts to it. And then ultimately, one of the things I'm actually somewhat concerned about is Galloway has changed his tune on whether or not you were calling for a general economic strike, which is don't show up to work. Mm-hmm. He has said, he was at first playing with the idea. And then he said, it's very easy for me to tell people to not show up to work when I don't suffer those economic consequences. But what we're seeing from some of these other protests that are sort of in line with this, and this kind of gets into my theory that it's hard to play macro games, is that they are calling for general economic strikes. And I think that is an extraordinarily dangerous game to play when you're telling people to no call, no show work or no show work when they do not have a union protecting them in the strike. And I don't know if they're aware of those potential consequences for people. We can move on to the next topic. Do you want to keep moving? I got another one. Did you want to do your favorite stock of 2026?
I have one more thought that I'll share.
Okay.
Which is a short, easy parallel to draw. We as a collective couldn't stay our butts home for a month or whatever amount of time would have been long enough to eradicate the COVID-19 pandemic when it first showed up here. We as a collective couldn't even commit to wearing a piece of cloth over our mouth and nose to keep from spreading a deadly virus to our next door neighbor. What gives him or anyone else the impression that people are going to be willing to commit to this thing so much that they're willing to maybe suffer the consequences of losing their job over it?
So to be clear, this is Galloway has backed off on the leave your or don't show up to work argument. This is from other protest groups.
I got it.
I want to make that clear.
Yeah, I listen to him frequently enough. I recognize that. I will acknowledge that he does a decent job of recognizing most of the time that he is coming at a thing from a very privileged place. Mm-hmm. He is a multimillionaire who's in his 50s or 60s at this point and has made his money already and can say whatever he wants to because he flies private and owns several homes. So, like, I get that. But whoever is calling for this at the expense of whoever listens to this and says, yeah, I like that idea. I think that makes some sense. I can get behind that. These aren't the droids you're looking for.
This episode is sponsored by Capital Area Planning Group. Capital Area Planning Group is a fiduciary wealth management firm that specializes in helping high net worth individuals and families navigate the complexities that come along with managing concentrated stock options, multiple income streams, and an ever-changing tax code. While our team of certified financial planners are well-versed in all things personal finance, our areas of expertise include equity compensation, estate planning, and multi-year tax planning. At Capital Area Planning Group, we believe in pricing transparency. That's why our fees are posted on our website, right alongside the various services we perform on behalf of our clients throughout the year. If you're tired of receiving the same cookie-cutter advice from your financial advisor, then don't wait. Reach out to us today at capgllc.com to experience a better approach to wealth management. Again, that web address is www.capgllc.com.
All right, now that we've just served up that macro vegetable platter, do we want to do stocks of 2026 that we're happy about? That's like a fun beginning of the year thing to do.
I was going to tell you Amazon, but I guess I got to change my mind now in case the boycott afoot actually cancels that one out. In all seriousness, I legitimately, I think 2026 is going to be the year of Amazon. Okay. What I am looking at when I say that is two things. One, the amount of investment that Amazon has made into robotics is crazy, like crazy good. I mean, if you think about it in terms of like how many billions of dollars have been dumped into the ground to build out data centers for AI developments, Amazon has basically said, we don't like having to deal with people when it comes to running our factories or fulfillment centers. The unionizing that's going on, we hear you, you're unhappy. The drivers who have sued us for unfair working conditions, we hear you, you're unhappy. And I'm not taking Amazon's side on any of this. I mean, it's clear that they like put employee morale, I'll just stop there, employee morale on the back burner when it comes to these fulfillment centers and all the other things. You can say whatever you want to about safety and paychecks and everything else. And they've said, we're going to replace, I think it was 75% of all of our workforce that operates these factories with robots. 2028, I think is the timeline, if I'm remembering this right. So all the investments they're making have been so that they can stop having to fight these fights with people and stop hiring human people to work in these fulfillment centers. So all of the dollars that they save going forward from that point on have to be accretive to the bottom line, because that just builds your gross profit more and more as people continue to buy more and more stuff. Then you layer on AI's ability to target the perfect right thing to the perfect right person at the perfect right time. And now your fulfillment centers and your pipeline is being driven by AI, knowing that typically Malcolm will order one giant box of hot chocolate in December and then run out in his house in mid-January and order again. And so we're going to do what we can to make sure that we get that in front of his face enough times that he buys it. And we're even going to increase the price on him, even though Ricky doesn't believe that that's right. We're going to increase the price on him to make sure that we get every dollar that we can, out of this exchange. Now, imagine doing that across multiple millions of households all at the same time without it costing you one additional dollar. That is why I think, or that's one of the reasons why I think Amazon's actually going to do a ton of business, and they're going to grow their revenue exponentially 2026 and 27. And I think the stock is going to start to reward them for that story this year.
Plus, it doesn't, most of Amazon's profit, I think, comes from like Amazon Web Services. It's not the retail business. So anytime we have that discussion. Well,
plus Amazon advertising, their digital advertising platform has actually become a meaningful business line for them too. It's still number 3. It's AWS, then it's retail, then it's advertising. However, the margins on the ads, especially with the ads being created and powered by AI, we're talking 85, 90% margins on that business. That's better than any other business line in the company. And so the more they convince people to watch their stuff on Amazon Prime and whatever else, the more they can sell those ads that are being generated by a machine in the first place. So the margins on it is like ridiculous.
I'll give you a quick one for mine, which is I'm going to say Chipotle, where I think that this is still a world-class company. You get a world-class company at a lower historic multiple it's worth paying attention to. And right now the stock's being punished on some comp sales issues. However, and some of the investors don't like the rate of expansion of Chipotle. To that, I would say, when Chipotle opens a new restaurant, their year 2 cash on cash return is 60%. Which means they get 60% of the money back from opening the restaurant in the second year that it's open. I think when they open those restaurants, they are absolute profit machines. There's still room to grow for them internationally. And with food affordability, I still think Chipotle is there because yes, prices have gone up, but you can get a healthy bowl for, $10, $12 in most cases. And that's still an excellent customer value for a lot of people. So I think basically there's been a temporary headwind with a continued strong unit economics story. And that was a company that I'd been looking to get into for a while. It was at, over 60 times trailing earnings. Now it's back around 30. Yes, that is that's expensive for a restaurant, but Chipotle is not like other restaurants.
You know what I would like to see? I don't own Chipotle. I'll probably never own it. But I would like to see Chipotle acquire 2 or 3 other similar concepts that operate similarly to them. So where Chipotle is build your own fast casual Mexican food, or Tex-Mex, let's call it what it is. Fast casual Tex-Mex. Like Roti, the company that does the Mediterranean food, whatever other concepts they can create, because what they do have dialed in is the supply chain, and they also have dialed in the pricing model that the customers are still willing to go with. And so all the pricing increases that I've seen Chipotle announcing earnings call after earnings call, they haven't really been penalized for it by their customers. What they're going through right now is not a dip in revenues. It's more the street just doesn't believe in the story right now. And so I think, to your point, they're really good operators. And so I think they could take this know-how across other concepts and actually have 2-3 other restaurant types that fit into the family of Chipotle companies.
I think the issue with that is every single time someone has promised to be the next, we're the Chipotle of Mediterranean, we're the Chipotle of Italian food. It's incredibly difficult to replicate that concept across different things.
That's my whole point, though. If anybody's going to be good at it, I would imagine Chipotle would be good at making you the Chipotle of Mediterranean or whatever else.
So here's the CTA, the content call to action. Let's say Spotify, because this is where a lot of people engage with the show. If you're listening on Spotify, what stock are you most excited about for 2026? Leave it in the comments, and then maybe Malcolm and I will hit it on a future show. I say maybe because I don't want to guarantee it if it's like a $50 million biotech that you're asking us to talk up. Okay, one of the topics I know that you are passionate about, and for the listener, I promise we will try to make this as engaging as possible, is insurance, because your day job is that of a financial advisor. And this is one of the biggest issues that people spend money on and need to think about often with an advisor. And there's a few areas that I think are particularly interesting. Number one, the newsiest we'll do first is health insurance, because I think this is one of the biggest economic stories of 2026, even for some publicly traded companies. We'll see if they want to talk about it. And that is the removal of ACA subsidies. And Rachel Ensign in the Wall Street Journal did a great story about how this is impacting people. And the headline is that for the typical person enrolled in ACA coverage, they are expected to face a more than 100% rise in premium bills. And that's from a nonprofit called KFF. And the actual numbers are about $900 a year to almost $2,000 per year. This is generally for people who are going to be struggling financially within the system, but the government doesn't deem is poor. And I'll throw it back to you on this. I think for consumer spending and just for people's own financial decisions, which is, am I going to buy health insurance or not? This is one of the biggest not macro, but United States economic stories and also personal financial issues that people are dealing with this year.
Yeah, well, to the point I think you were making, it is a everybody in the U.S. problem. Whether you have health insurance provided to you through your employer or some other mechanism, maybe you own your own business and you're able to pay for it for yourself and your family through that mechanism, and so you don't really care. I still think this is an all of us problem, in the sense that however many thousands of people decide I'm just going to go without, that does increase the cost of insurance for everybody else, because it's on a per head basis. The more people you have in the pool, the less premiums get to be for everybody, because more covered people lessens the number of people who are suffering some long-term illness or, have a meaningful health event that has to be covered by that insurer. So it's all of our problem. It just might be more directly some people are affected than others. So all that to say, I don't know what we can do about it at the moment. That's the really bad part of it. Like, it's messed up, but I don't know what any of us gets to do about it right now to fix the problem, other than to say, this is why you need to vote in November.
I agree. I don't have a great answer for how to fix this issue. I wish I did, because I understand, I think the United States has one of the most inefficient healthcare systems in the world. I don't think I'm breaking new ground in saying that. However, the cost of healthcare has gone up because of also you have longer lifespans and you have more advanced medical technology that people are using versus back in the day.
I will say, though, really quickly, it's dangerous for people to decide, usually younger people, I think, to decide, you know what, that's more than I want to pay for that. Not more than I can pay, but more than I want to pay for that. So I'm going to go without. And I say that because it's only one catastrophic event that wipes you out, right? Like, medical debt is the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States every year. And so it's a little bit foolhardy to say, because the premiums are going to double on me and go from $200 to $400, and I'm in my 20s anyway, so what do I care? I barely even want to have this insurance. My parents just bugged me until I bought it. I'm just going to go ahead and cancel it. That's definitely a mistake.
I'll tell you what I personally did is I had to I bought insurance this year. My thinking was this is extremely expensive. It's a little cheaper. My wife and I are about 30 years old. And the way I approached it was I am going to take the immediate co-insurance to kick in, because if I get if I have some doctor's appointments, or if we have, an issue, I want to get some insurance from that. And then I chose a really high out-of-pocket maximum. So, I think it's close to like $20,000. So I'm protecting myself from a catastrophic incident, but I'm also trying to get a little bit of insurance up front. And so I am not saying that is what you should do based on your personal situation or whatever, but that is how I approached that economic decision going into this year. But to your point of advising people to not, you have to have insurance. I think for some people it may not be an option, because the rise of health insurance, the rise of premiums for some Americans, this is the point the article makes, is more than an additional mortgage. So they highlighted one family, Ensign highlighted one family. This is on one of the more extreme end. The parents own their own business. They make $120,000 per year. And their premiums, after they got the subsidy removed, because in this example, the government thinks you are wealthy, their premiums went from $300 a month to $3,300 a month if they stayed on the same plan.
That's nuts.
I did a rough budget for them, which was, let's do the thriftiest possible grocery plan for 7 people. We're going to put $0 into savings. We'll assume you have a car, no debt. They're still underwater every single month. So, and that's without any room for savings. They were eventually able to find a cheaper plan, which I think for them was closer to $2,200. But even then, with the same assumptions of never going out to eat, the cheapest possible grocery plan you could do, or very cheap for 7 people, you're at about positive $80 a month in terms of cash flow.
Yeah.
So I
don't
think
get a parking ticket.
Exactly. It's you're pushing vulnerable people closer and closer to economic desperation with this specific decision. And I understand the brokenness of the American healthcare system is a long series of bad decisions in many cases. You want to do life insurance? This is the other big insurance topic that I know you have a lot of thoughts on. This is a little more evergreen. But before we get into it, I want to set the conditions a little bit. Many financial advisors sell life insurance, and this is a big debate in sort of the advisor community is, does it create a conflict of interest if you're selling clients life insurance, because generally you collect a commission on that? Or if I am fee only, then my clients are going elsewhere to buy insurance, and I trust myself more than whoever else they may find at a insurance shop. So before we get into it, do you sell insurance? Is this something we need to establish before we get into it?
Sort of. I and my firm are licensed to sell life, health, property, casualty, disability, like literally every single type of insurance there is. We're licensed to actually sell it. Yes, is the answer to your question. However, I want to go back to something else that you said to set the stage for this first. Not everyone who calls themselves a financial advisor is actually a financial advisor. There are several people who work for insurance companies who sell insurance for a living who refer to themselves as financial advisors. However, those people are not financial advisors. They are insurance salespeople. Or they'll say, I am a financial professional, and conflate those two terms together to give you the impression that they're saying the financial advisor. Financial professional and financial advisor are not the same thing. Just be aware that that is a very distinct difference from I advise people on how to buy insurance versus I advise people on all of the different aspects of their financial lives. And one of those things happens to be insurance.
One of the things with financial advice is it's how key terms change just a little bit that has a major impact on who you're working with. And in the case,
it's something the industry has been fighting to like clean up the language and trying their best to get FINRA and the SEC and the other regulatory bodies to like govern who's allowed to call themselves what and what letters they can use next to their name and all those kinds of things. And it keeps getting smacked down because the insurance lobby is so strong.
Yeah. And one of the things that is often sold, not bought, is the wrong type of insurance for people, which is whole life insurance versus term life insurance. And that basically means whole life means you pay for it for your whole life. It accumulates a cash value. It's promoted for the tax benefits because, hey, you can borrow from it. Whereas term life insurance is essentially a bet on whether or not you die in a certain period of time. And if you do, then you get the payout for something like your child's education or maybe a spouse who relies upon your income. So do you want to dive into the whole life insurance story and why you have an issue with it?
Yeah, I'll do my best to only stay like waist deep and not get too submerged into this one because I can go like on and on and on for this one. I actually wrote a article about this a long time ago called "Life Insurance is Not a Financial Plan" that I got a ton of heat for from the financial advisor community that I was like, bring it on. But then separately, one of the chapters in my book is also about life insurance being sold as a financial plan. And in reality, it's meant to be used as a tool just to close income gaps, like you just said, if and when something happens to you and there are people who rely on you financially. So I want to start this by saying, though, I am not against permanent life insurance or whole life insurance or whatever other term can be used to explain it. There are some very specific cases where it just makes a ton of sense. And it is the best option for people who are sitting across from someone who is financially incentivized to sell them that insurance. However, there are a lot of other circumstances where it's being sold to people incorrectly and unethically. So like the whole idea of you and your family are going to be able to be your own bank and you're going to buy this insurance and it's going to be family banking. I don't know how better to say it. That's the term that I keep hearing being used right now all over social media. And the concept of you can borrow against the policy and the cash value in it at any time to cover whatever thing your family needs to do. Well, if you just took those same dollars and invested them in a Vanguard index fund or SPY and bought the S&P 500 or whatever, they'd grow significantly more than the insurance premiums that are going into this policy that you can then borrow your own money against. And you can borrow against your investment portfolio using a securities-backed line of credit the exact same way. So where really is the advantage to anybody other than the institution that's selling the insurance? It's also when I see super young people who don't have a home, they don't have children, they don't have anyone who relies on them financially. And the way that it's being sold to them is, well, you're young and healthy now, so it makes more sense to get it today, even though you don't have those things that you'll need to cover. But I could be 25 buying life insurance right now, not get married and have kids and buy a house and anything else until I'm 35, 38, 40 years old. And I just spent 15 years effectively paying these insurance premiums that didn't do me any justice, that could have been going towards something else, paying my student loans off, putting money toward down payment to buy a house, anything else that I could have wanted to do with those dollars. The opportunity cost is gone because I wasted it on insurance premiums. It's going to pay out something that I didn't really need. And so it's sold to you based on the question of how much insurance can you afford? That's the way it gets approached a lot of times when younger people are coming into this, instead of how much insurance do you need? What is the thing that we're trying to cover? And most of the times when you approach it that way, how much insurance do you need? You probably could have solved that equation with term.
Well, I've never had, I'm gonna play the role of a financial advisor. I've never had a client's family come up to me after their loved one passed, Malcolm, and said, you know what, I wish the policy paid out a lower amount of money. So you're protecting your family from this sort of thing.
However, I have had adult children come to me who are, clients of mine, clients of the firm, who have said, I just found out that mom, dad owns this insurance policy that they're paying $25,000 a year for. They have been paying $25,000 a year for the last 13, 15, 20 years, I'm finding out. And here I am, an attorney who makes X amount of dollars, a physician who makes X amount of dollars, whoever with their own financial resources, a very significant income. And my parents are paying into this life insurance policy because they're supposed to be leaving me this financial legacy that I'm never going to need. How can I get my parents out of this situation? That is a conversation I find myself having more and more now when our clients in their 40s and 50s are having to step in and help take more control over their parents' financial situation. When they start to dig under the hood, they're like, what in the heck have they been paying for all this time?
The general rule of thumb that I have heard that I'll bounce at you is unless you have someone who will permanently rely upon your income, you do not need whole life insurance.
Well, I can't say that definitively, right? There are cases where, if I'm a business owner and I want to save for my own retirement and I have a 401k in place, but I want to go beyond the $73,000 or whatever that I'm allowed to put into the 401k plan each year, but I don't want to have the expense of having to cover the rest of my employees in doing that. Well, maybe a overfunded life insurance policy, which is a whole life policy that you prepay the premiums in like the first 7 to 10 years. Maybe that does make a ton of sense. And your retirement plan is you're going to take out policy loans that you're never going to pay. And it's basically the equivalent of taking Roth IRA distributions later on in your retired years. Because either way, it's tax free. It just gets subtracted from the policy value at the time that you pass away because you never paid back the loan. Like that could make perfect sense. I've had conversation with people that are like, I've done all these things. I've checked all these boxes. I don't have anywhere else for these dollars to go. What do we do next? Okay, well, you guys are going to end up leaving a substantial inheritance to your kids. You have several kids and they're not on equal footing financially. Maybe it makes sense for us to put a life insurance policy in place so that they can have enough cash to buy each other out of the thing that they don't want to be associated with when the time comes. Like those kinds of things make perfect sense, but they're like such one-offs. It's not a one size fits all, go be your own bank and this is going to change your life.
For the 4 listeners who remain right now, Malcolm, is there anything else you want to yell at them about regarding life insurance before we get to listener questions? It's okay. I've got time. I don't have a meeting after this.
No, they can email us. I'll gladly tell them why it's a bad idea. Send us into the show if you're on the fence about buying life insurance, what the pitch is that you have received and what it is you're on the fence about. And I will genuinely give it a look and share my 2 cents.
Our email is thistimepod@gmail.com. Thistimepod@gmail.com. Good transition because we've gotten some questions from listeners at that email address and also from Spotify comments. Both work. There's multiple ways that you can get in touch with the show, and we check them out. And I was happy to get some questions. So this one, Malcolm, comes from Wayne C. Curious if you would talk about the biggest laggard total loss in your personal portfolio in the thesis on why you continue to hold it and whether it is a candidate for tax loss harvesting in 2026. He doesn't want you to talk about a winner. He wants to hear you talk about a loser.
That's a fair question. And at the risk of sounding like Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street, I only ask that you'll judge me on my failures because I have so few of them.
Nice.
I'm actually having to log into my app to find out the answer to that question.
Do you want me to cut? I can do mine.
I kill my losers so fast that I honestly don't even know what would be the worst buy that I have.
I prepped for the question, so I have an answer, and that answer is PayPal. While Malcolm is looking at his phone while I tried to podcast with him,
I sold the heck out of PayPal really fast.
Mostly in a Roth, and some of it is in a brokerage. And I'm hanging on because I still believe in the long-term capital allocation story. I think this is a company that can sort of maintain its earnings and also continue to aggressively buy back shares. And this is something that I expect to be a not just 1 to 3 year story, but a 5 to 10 year story. So as long as they continue to pursue that disciplined capital allocation strategy, that's something that I'm going to continue to watch Alex Chris, who's their CEO. And that's why I'm still holding on to it.
All right. So this isn't really fair because the movement has happened very recently, but still technically true. ServiceNow is actually the one that's making me look silly. I'm down 20% in it since I initially bought it. And I just started buying it like 3 weeks ago. So, I'll give it a little bit longer. And like I said, I am very quick to kill the losers in my portfolio and use those dollars to buy more of the winners. So if you hear me suddenly talking about like it was time to give it a second look and I had to take it out behind the barn and shoot it, then that is, I as an investor am always looking for prove myself wrong kind of scenarios. And I bought that one thinking like, all right, this company has reached peak pessimism. It's time to step in. And I think it was down 25% at the point I started accumulating.
And it can always go lower. I have a quick question. So in order to do that, are you this is a technical question. Is this through your own personal monitoring, or when you buy a stock, do you set a stop loss, which means that if a stock hits a certain price level, then you automatically sell it in order to kill the losers?
So without getting too much into the weeds, we as a firm, based on our trading rules, are not allowed to have anything other than market orders.
Okay.
Keeps us from getting better pricing than any of our clients. However, I have alerts set, price targets in both directions on every stock that I own. And so once it triggers, it's outside of that band, it gets my attention and makes me jump in to see what's the story, why is it trading that way, what action might I need to take today, that kind of thing.
Last question comes from Alex Tran 3434 on Spotify. And we've talked about food habits on the show. We talked food earlier in the show. Would it be possible for you to touch on inflation versus wage growth since the pandemic? And would love to hear your thoughts. And I actually do think there's a food story here, which is that I looked at Fred, and the way the math works out is that the cost of food has risen at more than 10x the rate of wage growth since Q1 of 2020. And in this calculation, there's some argument because you adjust wage growth for inflation, but you don't adjust food cost for inflation because it's a component of inflation. So I believe that isolates how much food has grown. And I think that this is also one of the big affordability issues. And, Fred measuring this, the food of cost in cities, which combines eating out and groceries, it's up 32% from January 2020. So it's about 5% per year. And the median wage for people employed, wage and salary, is up about 2.5% over the same amount of time. So the CAGRs for food is about 5% per year. And for wage growth, it is 0.4% per year. And, that's one of those things where people see the S&P 500 go up and to the right, but ultimately that doesn't matter nearly as much as how they're feeling when they check out at the grocery store.
So I think it's interesting looking at how many of the things that came into existence during the pandemic that were like terrible things for a terrible time have persisted since then. And what things we decided we were just going to live with, and what things companies decided for us, we can continue getting away with this because people aren't paying enough attention. And this feels like it goes in those two are intersecting. And so I was reading something recently. I can't even remember what outlet it was to give attribution properly, but it was a long, deep dive on the fact that it used to be 2020, 21, 22, maybe 23. The thing to do was every 9 to 12 months, find a new job, and that was how you increased your salary by 5 to 10%. And now, instead of job switchers being the ones to create the arbitrage, it's actually the people who are staying put in their jobs who are seeing wage growth. But the wage growth that they're seeing is like a third of what it was for the job switchers 3 or 4 years ago. And so even just in that relationship, wage growth has come down because people are scared to leave their job to go get another one now. And it's the job hugging is the term that now I see a lot of outlets calling it instead of the job switching. And so I think part of it is, to your point on a previous show, the psychological effects of the narratives that exist out there. The fact that there's a term now for job hugging says that it is being impressed upon people you're better off staying where you are and not stepping out from the herd. But usually the narrative is the thing that's keeping this thing in check, not necessarily the actual economics of it. So I don't have any data to say whether, it is a good time to be job switching. Obviously, it's going to depend on which industry and everything else. But I do think that wage growth has obviously come down significantly because employers are able to. And that's one of those things that's kind of shifted since the pandemic that I don't know that it's going to change now because they don't have to.
I think it's a topic for a future show, which is we don't have to raise wages because we're investing so much into artificial intelligence.
Well, that is scaring people, right? Yeah. And so you're keeping people in check and keeping them from being willing to change jobs because another narrative that's out there is AI is coming for your job, white collar worker. So you better stay in line and be glad you have the job.
One question I have, that this is sort of a test. I've been trying to promote this show on TikTok a little bit, and we've had clips gain some traction. I have a real question, which is if you came here from TikTok and you made it to minute 50 whatever of this show, I want to know, because I want to know if this is actually an effective funnel or if it is truly impossible to get people to leave the glow state. You can do that. Email thistimepod@gmail.com. Spotify comments also work. You can find me on LinkedIn, Ricky Mulvey, @RickSoSlick on Twitter. And Malcolm is @MalcolmOnMoney on social media platforms. Thanks for being here.
Information shared in this recording and by its guests represent the views and opinions of the guests and does not represent the views or opinions of the host. This content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. This content is not, nor is it intended to be a substitute for professional financial advice. It is always recommended that you seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your personal financial situation.